Okay, so this Unity tutorial is just going to act as like a getting familiar with the UI and controls and look of the Unity editor. We're not going to get into any sort of scripting or code, so if you're already kind of comfortable with that, you can skip this tutorial. All right, so when you log in or make a new account, you're going to be presented with a screen where it shows all your different Unity projects, and you just have to hit the new button here to create a new project. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to be making a 3D project, so make sure that little 3D button is ticked. And we're just going to name this Unity Tutorial 2018, because that's the year. And I just store it in Unity projects folder off my second hard drive. You can put it wherever you want. And this organization tool is used for the Unity analytics, so if you have that on or off, if you want to give Unity your data and usage statistics, whatever. All right, and when you're ready, just hit create project and it will open up the editor, do a few little things in the background. Okay, so when you first open a Unity project, you're presented with this default view of the editor, and you're going to notice a few different content boxes and some buttons and all these different labels over things. The first thing that we want to do though is change from the default services panel that we have over here to the inspector panel, since we don't really need to use any of the services for the tutorial, and the inspector panel is pretty important to know and learn. All right, so Unity games are organized in a series of scenes. So right now there's only one scene. It's called Untitled. It's over here. You can also find the name of it that we have currently open up here in the header. And right now, within the default scene, there's only the main camera and the directional light. Okay, so there's two different ways that we can select objects. So we can select objects within the 3D world by clicking onto these little 2D representations of the camera or the light over here, or over here in the hierarchy panel, it is a list of all the game objects currently within the scene. All right, and so when you click on each of these objects, the inspector panel populates with all this information about that object. So every object in the scene is going to have a transform component. The camera obviously has a camera component. This is also where the skybox originates from. We can change a number of things here. You can change to an orthographic game or a perspective-based game. You can enable a lot of different things here, such as the different clipping planes. So this shortens what is being rendered and how far out it will start rendering things. It's best to just kind of leave it at default since we're not super concerned about any of these features. The field of view changes the angle in which the player perceives everything in the 3D world. It's probably good just to keep it at 60. All right. So we want to add some things to the scene because there's not a whole lot going on here with just a camera and light. So there's a number of ways that you can add new objects. You can either right click in the hierarchy panel to get this context menu, and these are just some simple objects that you can create and insert. So what we want to do is start with the plane. Okay, and maybe we also want to add a cube, so we can also use this button to add stuff. And then if you go to this triple bar menu, you can also add more game objects here. So maybe we want to add a sphere. Okay. All right, so we want to talk about navigating the scene first off, because you don't want to edit your entire game from this perspective in the scene view forever, because this probably isn't super convenient and it's not very interesting. So the way that I prefer to navigate the scene is by holding the right click mouse, so your cursor becomes this eye within the scene view, and you can control and manipulate the scene using this first person perspective to rotate your perspective. And then you can use WASD to actually navigate through the scene. So if you are really interested in the relationship or the distance or the height of this cube and the sphere, then we can navigate to those items. And we can figure out small details like, oh no, the sphere is clipping within the plane or whatever. Okay, so that's one way you can move around. You can also use the first Unity tool here, which is the hand booking tool, and you can move by left clicking and sort of dragging the scene, or you can use the arrow keys to sort of translate around. I feel like Personally, it's very awkward and it's not as intuitive as right-clicking and moving using WASD. Oh, and Q and E, you can lower and elevate yourself. Okay, so we're just gonna go over the other tools here. I've been using them kind of without explaining them. When you click on an object, you can manipulate them using these different tools. So the first tool that is shown by default is the move tool. This just lets you translate things along different axes. So the blue handle maps to the z-axis, the red handle maps to the x-axis, and the green one maps to the y-axis. With this tool, there's also these little planes here that you can use to select two different axes. So if you only want to translate it along the y and x plane, you can do that without affecting the depth of it. That may be useful in certain contexts. Okay, there's also the rotate tool, where you get to rotate things along a certain axis. It's kind of hard to look at that with sphere objects. So let's look at the cube rotations. Okay. You know, multiply or move it along the y-axis just to give it some rotation. There's also the scale tool here, which allows you to scale these objects based on the axis that you select to. Or if you select this middle cube, you will manipulate all the axes. There's also this rectangular scale tool. I don't find it as convenient as the other ones or as finely controlled because it's manipulating, I guess, both the position and scale and other things, and it's kind of quirky. And this last one is if for some reason you want all the controls, the first three, rotate, move, and scale, in one tool. So here's the scale a little bit. Here's the translation one. You can rotate it using these little discs. Yeah. And so all these tools are actually mapped to QWERTY. So Q is the hand tool, W is the move tool, E is the rotate tool, R is the scale tool. It just goes down the line with QWERTY and Y being the last one here. Yeah, and if you did want to transform things, you just have to select the object. And if you wanted more precise things like, oh no, this is negative 0.02, that doesn't mean anything useful to me, you can just punch in numbers in the editor here, or if you hover over the label itself, you can move it by just dragging it left and right after you left click it. Also changing the rotation. Just gonna reset these to, oh, I want to do that as a 0. Just to orient it flat. Okay. So you can also notice that each of these objects, the ones that aren't the cameras and light, have different components here. So the two important ones that you might want to point out is just the box collider. So this determines how the collisions work. So it triggers an event every time different colliders collide with each other, and then it will return the object back of what you collided with in each independent event. So this will fire a collider event on its box collider, and this will fire a collider event with the sphere collider. And you can control those independently in their respective scripts. Okay. Here's also where you can change the material. So if you don't like the default gray material for this cube, you can create a new material and add it there. Okay. But there's not too many interesting things that you can do in the editor without code. So we want to start moving into the scripting tutorial. So to do that, let's say we want our character object to be this cube. We can start writing a character script and add this component and hit new script, and we'll just call this movement. And you can change the language between C# and JavaScript. I don't think I installed that package when I installed Unity because I prefer using C# anyway. And then you just hit create and add. So it's going to create a script component in your assets window, as well as attach the script component to your object. And we could also theoretically do this to the sphere. We can go within scripts, and our movement script will actually be there also. It's the one that we just created, so we can put it on both. So if we didn't want to move both of these things, you can either remove the component by right-clicking it, or you can uncheck it, so that means that it will not be active you know, in case we don't want to delete any settings that we've configured for it or whatever. But like we said, we're going to make our player object the cube. Okay, so in the next tutorial, I'll start talking about scripting.